Welcome to the We Hack Purple podcast, where we talk about application security, how to secure software, and also DevSecOps, AppSec, and basically everything revolving around how to make our software a bit more secure. This podcast is sponsored by Bright Security, who makes a dynamic application security testing tool. I am Tanya Janca, and I am your host. Today, I have with me my friend, my professional mentor, and a person who showed me all about the world of OWASP. And his name is Sherif Koussa. Welcome, Sherif.
Hi, Tanya. Hi, everyone. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Can you tell everyone a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your company?
For sure. My name is Sherif Koussa. I am a software developer by training. Wrote a lot of enterprise yet insecure software for about 8-9 years until I got introduced to the world of OWASP. I realized all of the insecure software I was writing, so I decided to do better. And so I got involved with OWASP. I got involved with SANS. I worked for Wells Fargo in the security code review team for some time, and then I started a company called Software Secured. Software Secured is a penetration testing as a service company where we help software development teams at fast-growing companies to continuously ship secure code. That's basically a little bit about me.
Awesome. Thank you. So I invited Sherif on the show because, well, one, I really like him, but two, because I'm totally obsessed with the Log4j situation. For those that follow me, I've written, I think, 4 different articles and made a few videos. And I think I'm really obsessed because I wish that we could do better. And so Sherif and I were talking about it, and between the two of us, we had a lot of ideas on the topic. So Sherif, do you want to maybe talk about what the heck Log4j or the Log4j situation is?
Sure. So for everybody's knowledge, Log4j is obviously this open source library that most Java applications use for logging. If you're using a Java application, probably you or the framework that you're using is using Log4j. Now, December, right before Christmas, I remember that vividly because that was some of the most stressful time we've ever had at Software Secured. Somebody found a vulnerability in the Log4j library, and basically they can get remote code execution. So, and a bunch of other things. The impact was pretty severe. It was a CVSS score of 10 out of 10, which means imminent threat to every Java application that is using a vulnerable Log4j library. So that was it. And the reason that was so stressful is as a penetration testing, as a service company, our clients were looking for us, all panicked out. What do we do? This is a CVE 10 out of 10. You don't see that every day. There's a lot of Java, regardless of what you think. There's a lot of Java applications out there. The chances, and if you have a Java application, chances are you're using Log4j. So which applications has the problem? Are we vulnerable or not? How are we vulnerable? What do we need to do, etc.? This is just before Christmas, where we're trying to kind of like finish what we need to do in order to enjoy a little bit of time off. And then this bug hits, and we had to leave everything that we're doing and all of the deadlines that we have and focus on this. It was just very, very, very stressful.
Yeah. And I remember I was explaining to someone why it was so scary. And I said, so basically, usually in order to get remote code execution, you need an advanced attacker, a person that has a clue, that has experience, that knows a lot of stuff. But for this one, you could literally just copy and paste a list of like a string into the address bar, press enter. And if they had it, you would then be able to execute code on their web server. So that's what RCE or remote code execution means. It means that literally then you have a shell into their computer. Like you can do stuff on their server. That's terrifying.
Right. So the other thing is that you can do that unauthenticated. That's the other part. That's when you get the 10 out of 10 score, is whether you need any special privileges to execute the vulnerability. And in the case of Log4j, it was unauthenticated. Anybody doesn't have any access to your application. They just have the URL, can execute that vulnerability. That's why it was so scary to so many people.
Yes. So you don't even need to log into the website that you're on. And this means that people who really know nothing about computers could actually execute this. And the string of what you needed to do was floating all around the internet. It was not hard to find. I didn't put it in any of my articles because I was like, you can go find that yourself if you want to do something bad.
Right.
You have to at least have some Google foo.
Yep, that's right.
But yeah, this is why it was so scary. And the timing was just so crappy right before Christmas. Oh, yeah.
And it was right before the weekend as well. So the team had to work through, we developed a tool to basically make it easy for us to identify whether the applications that were kind of like pen testing are vulnerable. We have to kind of like prove it because, well, some of our clients have hundreds of applications. We're not pen testing all of those, but which applications, which is part of what we need to talk about, is you need to have an inventory of your assets to start with, right? But yeah, it was so stressful.
It was. And you could tell that the whole industry was stressed because everyone was talking about it. There were several different hashtags assigned to it. And a whole bunch of vendors came out and said, well, we prevented Log4j. We're perfect. If you just bought our tool, you would have been safe. And I'm not a fan of fear, uncertainty, and doubt style marketing, sometimes called FUD marketing. I'm really not a fan of you have to give us your money or you should fear bad things will happen to you. I don't like that. Some of them, I saw some demos and they're like, this is how we blocked Log4j, but lots of them I was like, no, you're full of it. Your product just doesn't do a thing where you could have stopped that. So yeah.
The other thing is that there were multiple variations. So they were happening right after each other. I believe by the time it was said and done, there were either 4 or 5 CVEs logged. So it is not just one variation of the bug. There's multiple variations. You need to protect against all of them. So I guess this is part of the industry that I really don't like, which is two things. The FUD factor, which is the sky is going to come falling apart tomorrow if you don't do this. And the other factor is buy my tool in order for the sky not to come falling apart on you, right? And that's, I think, the dark side of our industry, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah, I do not love it. I remember I hired more than one marketing consultant when I worked at We Hack Purple. And I remember one of them was just like, yeah, like you're not going to be able to support your family if you don't buy our courses, and like they're going to take your baby away. I was like, oh my God, no, like you're fired, buddy. Like just pack up your stuff and go. It's so awful. I was like, no, can we focus on positives?
Yeah.
So you and I were talking before we started recording about, because I'm a big fan of, we talk about a problem and then we give solutions. And we were talking about how there's sort of solutions that a company can do for itself. And then there's solutions that we as a whole industry need to implement. Which one do you want to start with? Like what your team can do or what we as an industry need to try to push forward?
Let's start with, as an industry, what do we need to push forward? I guess as a person in general, I like to focus on what's in my control. However, I think it's very important for the industry to take this side seriously. So we have to get that. But I'd like to spend more time on what's in our control. What can I go and do tomorrow, right, to protect myself from Log4j?
Okay.
How about that? Sounds good.
So which one's first? Sorry.
The industry specific.
Okay, that's what I thought, but I was like, oh, I feel okay.
Yeah.
So we're talking about this a lot. So there are some industries that are regulated and some that aren't.
Yep.
So for instance, if you go and get a tattoo in Canada, it's not regulated. Like anyone with a tattoo can say, I'm a tattoo artist and can give people tattoos. And that stuff is permanent, as far as I can tell. But if you, for instance, want to go get a massage, if there's a registered massage therapist, that's regulated. There's a governing body that regulates it. And if you screw up, you get kicked out of the club. And then
Yeah.
people can't get insurance claims. And so then people usually don't hire unregistered massage therapists because reasons. And so our industry right now is in the tattoo type of area where there's no regulation. You don't technically have to run any security testing, and you can just put a web app on the internet.
Yeah.
So
I mean, that too compared to massage therapists is very interesting one. Um, I see a lot of challenges in implementing that just because we don't want the government intervening with the freedom of the internet in general,
yeah,
right? Part of open source and how it become the giant industry that it is right now, that there was no regulations, that everybody can create anything, and it's up to you, Mr. Consumer, is to figure out if this is for you or not. So getting the government involved in that might be tricky, to say the least. Whether you kind of like compliance or not, it is getting companies. There's a lot of people that don't like compliance. It's a false security. Compliance doesn't equal security, et cetera, et cetera. However, it got a lot of companies doing a whole lot more than what they would have done without the compliance. Being part of that might make more sense in the short term. What do you think?
yeah. So I teach secure coding, and so does Sherif. And if I immediately I'm like, does your company handle credit cards? And if they say yes, I'm like, then we're going to cover the 12 PCI things because I need you to know that, right? But there's lots of companies where they don't have any training, they don't do any testing, they don't, and universities and colleges and boot camps pumping out students all the time that know how to make software but don't know how to make sure it's safe to use. If we had some regulation on, or not regulation, if we had compliance options at least, then as a consumer, so when I use my Visa or my MasterCard, I would say American Express, but who am I kidding? I don't use those. But like when I use them, I feel safe, I feel protected.
Yeah.
And they've worked really hard on that. And PCI compliance, it's not perfect. I'm not trying to claim it is, but companies that are PCI compliant, you know they're doing a certain level of things, right? You know they're doing some security testing. You know they have antivirus, and that they're doing these things, and they're putting a foot forward. Is it perfect? No, it's not perfect. And some people that are PCI compliant, they go way beyond like what it is asked, and some do the bare minimum. But I would rather the bare minimum than nothing.
Exactly. Something else is SOC 2. We deal almost 99% of our clients. They have to be SOC 2 compliant, and it's not mandatory like PCI DSS. It's not mandatory. It is PCI DSS. You either do it or you're not handling credit cards, right? SOC 2 is not the same. SOC 2 it is enforced by them by their enterprise clients.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So it is kind of like, hey, this is my report according to not my opinion about what I'm doing about security. It is according to a SOC 2, which is kind of like an industry standard. Being part of that also might make more sense.
Bright Security just got our SOC 2 and SOC 1. And
it's a lot of work.
It was mandatory. A bunch of companies told us we're not going to buy it unless you do that. And we're like, well, we'll go get it. Thank you. Yep, on our way.
Yeah, and it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work, especially type 2. It's a lot of work. Yeah.
Yeah. But as a result, now we have so we're a security company, so we already had a lot of the things, but we have a few more things now than we had before as a result. And I think that's really great. So maybe customers, so we go back to the industry versus individuals. So when a giant enterprise wants to hire Software Secured or wants to buy Reshift or Bright or some other product, they can say, you need to be SOC 2 compliant or we're not going to buy it. What can an individual do in that case?
Yeah. that's the part that I think, because we have more control over that than what the industry can do or the government can do. So I'm looking back at right before Christmas when it hit, and the challenges that some of our clients had was, one, we don't know exactly all of our applications. And some of our clients were really big. Yes, we might be testing only 4 or 5 of their main web applications, but they have hundreds of other applications, right?
Mhm.
So we don't even know what are those applications, what are the URLs, what is each one used for?
Yeah.
Is that still active or not? Or some developer just spun this application just to test something that's not needed anymore? That's the first thing. The second thing is, okay, we know that this application is a Java application. We know it probably using Log4j, but are we vulnerable or not? Right? Are we using Log4j in the first? Are we using the Log4j that is vulnerable to the vulnerability, to the CVE, right?
Yeah.
So trying to figure out all of those questions when you have a time bomb of an attacker sitting in their basement somewhere halfway around the world with just the URL to hack is tough. Is super tough. So getting those questions answered before the next Log4j happens, I think is key.
Yes. Yes. So at the time of Log4j, I was doing 30 hours per week with one of my clients, completely unrelated to that. We had a big project that they wanted to do, and I was like, I'm going to lead this for you. That's going to be awesome. And we're switching out their entire tool set for AppSec. And I had just rolled out a software composition analysis tool, and I had taken the inventory from the previous AppSec person who had left. So basically, their main AppSec person left, and they were in this huge lurch. And it's like, can you come in and pitch it and help us recruit someone new? And I was like, let's do it. And I rolled out this new SCA tool. So then when Log4j came out, it's like, oh my gosh, this is really quite bad. I immediately searched through all of our repos to look for it, because you can just
Mm-hmm.
look in your code repositories and see if you have it at all. And we had some. But then the software composition analysis tool showed me which versions, and we actually didn't have any vulnerable versions. And I was like, yes.
Nice.
But then I found out there were many, many repositories that no one had told me about, that weren't on the inventory, that weren't part of the software. So then I spent the next few weeks just calling and emailing like every single dev that I could talk to. I'm like, do I have everything? Do I have everything? And then we found 5 more repositories. We also found one, Sherif, that had many disasters inside of it, but Log4j was not one of them. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, we eventually ended up completely unscathed on the custom application side. And that was great, but it was a lot of luck. It was also a lot of having versions of Log4j that were so old that they were not vulnerable. They were version 1x. And they're like, yay, we're not vulnerable. I'm like, oh, you're still vulnerable. You're just not vulnerable
There's
to this
something
one thing.
else.
You
Yeah,
should not
exactly.
be proud
Yeah.
of this.
So basically, just an inventory of either the repos you have, or inventory of the live applications you have, either on production or what have you. That's a good starting point. And then a static code analysis, sorry, a software composition analysis to understand, look quickly for this particular application. Are we using this library or not? I think that would be a good start. What do you think?
Yes. And then can they use a SAST tool past that to see if they're vulnerable or not? What do you think?
The SAS tool, it could be used to identify. So the SAS tool, so that basically the software composition analysis will tell you what are the dependencies that you're using,
Mm-hmm.
and if it's a good software composition analysis that is security focused, will tell you once the CVE has been published, right? Um, if you're using a good static code analysis tool, it will tell you if you're using it in a vulnerable manner. It's not a confirmation though that you're using it in a vulnerable manner. It's a suggestion that you're using it in a vulnerable manner.
Yeah.
A better use in this particular case is a dynamic analysis because you can quickly identify that if the dynamic analysis tool supports the vulnerability quick enough, or if you're using or you're obviously a human, a pen tester can also confirm that. Cannot confirm it at scale. You can use the DAST for that. You can use the pen testing team for the ones that are kind of like your bread and butter applications.
Nice. Nice. We were talking also about, so let's say you work somewhere and there is another open source piece of software, like, and it has a vulnerability that is similar scariness level to Log4j. We talked about if you did virtual patching, that this is a
Mm,
thing that could potentially help. So virtual patching is where you take a WAF, that's a web app firewall, or a RASP, a runtime application security protection tool, and you tell it, I am worried about this specific thing. So it's usually regular expression or regex that looks like the attack. And basically you say, just block anything that looks remotely like this.
yep.
And
So
it's not perfect, but it
that's
helps.
the thing. So here's the thing. So I said the part that was very stressful is you were on a time clock, right? You did not have time for the Log4j instance.
Yeah.
In order for you to increase the window, a WAF is a must. The problem comes when you think that the WAF is the done
It's
all
perfect.
end all. This is perfect. That's the problem. It's not. So it is going to increase the window because the kid sitting in their basement in whatever like the not very sophisticated hacker, now they cannot just take a URL and hack you, right?
Yeah.
Because they have to modify the attack a little bit. The sophisticated hacker, the WAF is not going to stop them, to be honest with you, right? So
Yeah.
that's the problem. It's going to increase the window, but it's not going to protect you completely.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Um, During 2016, I was doing AppSec and I worked somewhere and they were using every single version of Struts. And during 2016, three different high level CVEs came out for Struts. And my
Yeah,
whole
I
life
think I
was
know
so,
what is that, but yeah,
I hate Struts so much. Um, and that's what we did. So they made a virtual patch so that, and so for people that are unaware, when you patch an operating system, you press some buttons and you do some tests to make sure nothing breaks, and then eventually you can put the thing
hmm
out. But when we say patch a framework, so this is part of a framework, this could break so many parts of your application. And when
yeah,
I talked to a bunch of devs, I was like, listen, we need to upgrade off of this version. Some of them said, I'm gonna have to re-architect this entire application to do that. Like I need a year. And
yeah,
I said, okay, so let's get some WAFs going.
yeah. I mean, I don't know if we're talking about the same organization, but one of the organizations that I helped was using Struts One,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, we have Shreds 1 and Shreds 2 all over the place. I've seen it at a bunch of
And
places still.
yeah, and they were a place where they just cannot push code quickly. It's just not part of what
Yeah.
they can do, right? So this is opposite to what everybody's trying to do, but that situation worked for them, right? They
Yeah.
had a particular list of open source pieces that you can use. They are
Hmm.
not updating it. It's very close. You cannot use anything else. You cannot add to this list unless you have a very good reason why to, right? And then this is very closed. A lot of people say this like we've passed this. It's the world of agile, the world of like we have to move fast. Keep in mind, this place cannot. It's kind of
Yeah.
like the most secure. Think of a bank. It's not a
Yes.
bank, but think of a bank, right?
Lots of places though are like this, Sharif. Like not
Uh,
necessarily banks. Like there's just tons of places in
right.
where they can't ship code quickly, where a change takes months instead of days or weeks or hours. And like their main risk, I feel for some organizations, is that they can't make a change for up to a year.
Right,
because their processes are so heavy and rigid.
right. But the one thing that worked for them is that they knew the risk. It was 2015, 2016. They knew the risk of open source, and they kept a close look and a close, firm grip on the open source libraries that they have. I'm not saying that this is a model for everyone. I'm saying in this one particular situation, that worked for them because they knew exactly what they're using, right?
Yeah,
Although they didn't have an SCA tool, a static composition analysis, they didn't have, but they have an SBOM, software bill of
bill of
material,
materials.
right? So that worked for them.
I think another thing that companies need is an incident response team
Yep.
that either understands AppSec or has a person on the AppSec team they can call upon that knows how to help. Because I've worked at a lot of places where I'd be in the interview for AppSec and I'd say, listen, I don't want to do IR. I get really stressed. Like it's exciting, it's fun, but I get really stressed out. I'm not good at
Mhm.
handling the level of stress involved. I really like my sleep. And they'd be like, don't worry, Tanya, don't worry. We
Yeah.
have an incident response team. I'm like, great. And then 3 weeks in, there'll be an incident with one of the pieces of software. And they're like, Tanya, get over here. Everywhere except Microsoft, because Microsoft is pretty amazing. They're
Yeah.
like, we got this. But every other place was like, oh, you know how we said you didn't have to do that? We lied, get over here. And then my week is just ruined. Um, and
Yeah, incident response sucks. Incident response. I mean, it's a lot of people get excited by it. It. I mean, you have to be on call. It is very stressful. The one thing that makes it suck less, is basically having a plan. We know what we're gonna do
yes.
when kind of like the problem happens.
Well, and making sure they're trained up. Because
Hmm.
quite frankly, I've dealt with lots of IR teams where they say, "Oh, well, just patch it, and then can you have that done this hour?" I'm like, "That it's gonna take months. It's gonna cost at least $50,000." And they look at me like, "No, just press the button.
Hmm.
You don't understand software." Um,
That's that's the problem. That's the problem with a lot of security guys that haven't dealt with software before. They would say, "You just have to add 2 lines of code to do this," and I'm like, "Oh no, it is yes. The change is 2 lines of code. The process to get those 2 lines of code done in the software, release that software is month, right?"
yes. Oh my gosh. I was impressed that during the Log4j situation, some of the content delivery networks, um, especially, so I don't always like call out things, but Cloudflare impressed me. um, and they came out with like a virtual patch for all their clients and just blocked it for everyone under them. And that's not part of their general business plan as a content delivery network. That's what WAFs and RASPs do. But I feel like the industry really took this seriously
Yeah.
and did everything they could to help everyone, even people that weren't their customers. And I liked that.
I honestly like. I know some people have some comments about Cloudflare. I do like Cloudflare for something like that where they just rolled it on. I like their deep technical blog posts where they explain, like for example, the
Roger.
Rogers uh, blackout that we got a couple of weeks ago. They
Yeah.
had a very good blog explaining what they saw, right? And there was a lot of rumors. It could be this, could be that, could be this, and we don't know, but this is what we saw,
Yeah.
right? And I loved it. I loved it. One of the things that we did, and we just did it for all of our customers, is I spent my weekend just trying to write as much technical details as possible to help our clients are pretty technical. So explain to them what's going on, explain them what they need to do, explain them. We rolled out the tool. We tested everybody for free. It wasn't the time to charge anybody or think about pricing or any of that. So it's time to get things done, right? So obviously we're a much smaller scale than somebody like Cloudflare. So when somebody like Cloudflare comes and do something like that, you just have to admire them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like there's certain companies in our industry that really put their best foot forward quite often, and there's other ones that just they're give me your money, go away. Um,
We're the best, or the sky's gonna fall.
Yep.
It will fall down tomorrow.
So there's
Yeah.
there's one thing we haven't talked about, and we're running out of time, but I wanted to still bring it up, and that is so we have all this open source in the world, and lots of people use it every day. At some point, I feel like the government or industry or something, we have to have some sort of standardization or some sort of process or regulation or just something. Because people say, well, there's open source developers. Like, why aren't there open source security folks that just run around and review code and
Mhm.
secure things? And the answer is there's just not enough security folks, period, to do all the security
Yep.
work that is paid. So how
Yep.
are we going to make extra hours in a day to run off and do it for free?
I mean, it's very important. It's very important to have something in place. It is, the question is, what is this something looks like? And it's up for interpretation, obviously, but there is some responsibility on the open source project itself.
Yeah.
However, if you talk to these guys, they would say, I'm doing this for free. There's really no money for 99% of the open source projects. There's no money in it. It's just a labor of love. So, and the license reflects that. This is as it is. If you read the license, you're going to take the software because if I started doing all of this work, I'm not going to do the work that I set out to do when I created that open source project, right?
Yeah.
So there is a place where we have to go to the open source projects and tell them, hey, I love what you're doing. I understand it's a labor of love, but your labor of love is being used by a lot of companies, and now we're depending on it. And in some cases, people's lives depend on it. What
Yeah.
can we do to help you out here? Right?
Yeah.
That's one aspect from the open source project side of things. From an industry side of things, being part of a SOC 2 ISO 27001 PCI DSS, where they have a little bit more stringent clauses about the use of open source, at least I want to know that you have a a software composition analysis running. I know that you have an SBOM created and updated, something around that. And finally, from our perspective, taking this a little bit more seriously, it is not a luxury anymore to have kind of like a list of applications, to have SBOMs going on, to have an incident response. Not a luxury, not just for the Log4j, just in general for good security hygiene in general. Right?
Sherif, I agree completely. I also hope that over time we're going to start seeing more companies contributing back to the open source they use. Like,
Yep.
so Sherif and I used to run an OWASP chapter together and in Ottawa, Canada, and Shopify would host our
Mm-hmm.
events quite often for a few years, and they were very generous and awesome. But a thing that I like about Shopify is they have a bug bounty program, and they constantly contribute fixes to Ruby gems. And then the rest of the people that use Ruby on Rails can then get those fixes. So they've been literally securing that framework single-handedly for years. And if we could have more companies adopt that sort of thing, where it's like, if I'm going to use this framework, I'm going to contribute to it. I'm going to run static analysis on the libraries themselves to make sure
Mm-hmm.
that they are secure. I think that would be huge, because there's lots of companies that use Java all the time, and
Yeah.
they don't contribute
Yeah.
anything back, and they just
Yeah.
take for free.
Yeah.
So I don't know if eventually there could be a license that says, if you use more than X of this, you have to contribute, to security fixes
That's a
back to
very
our
good
framework.
idea. Yeah. That's a good idea. That's a good
Like the
idea.
license is it's free, but you
Yeah.
got you got to put your dishes in the dishwasher after. Like,
That's a good
the
way to
food's
put it.
free, but you got to wash your dishes. I
Yeah.
maybe we'll see that. Maybe the Apache organization or some other big open source group will slowly try to push something like that out, because for a giant enterprise, it wouldn't cost that much to just contribute one or two fixes.
Yeah, I agree. If there's a change that we're going to enforce on the open source community, it has to come within the open source community, not from the government, I think.
Yeah, I think that's the best way. I think that
Yeah.
would be the best way. Okay, Sherif, we've run out of time. Thank you so much for agreeing to
You're
come on
welcome.
the Hack Purple
Glad to be here.
podcast.
Glad to
Awesome.
be here.
Thank you to Bright Security, our sponsor. Thank you, Sherif Koussa from Software Secured and Reshift. And again, I'm Tanya Janca, your host. I always forget to tell you that. Thank you so much, and we hope to see you again on the We Hack Purple podcast.